dropping this here, but it was inspired by a chit stream about venture studios. YC has been successful innovating on founder, startup, and capital formation. And they've done it in two ways, I think, two main components. The first is surfacing founders with high founder energy or big founder energy. And the second is making sure that those founders don't waste that founder energy on dumb things that don't actually add value to the startup, such as trying to chase down VCs or build MVPs without talking to users. So they've been successful, but I don't think it scales. I don't think their selection process scales, and I think they've had diminishing returns as their cohorts have gotten bigger. They don't publish their cash-on-cash returns, at least not that I could find. But if anyone has any information of how they've done with regard to their hit rate, I'd be interested in hearing that. And their innovations on preserving founder energy, I think, can be described as first, giving a standard deal of capital so that there's money to live on and to build. And then second, having a community, and this has become increasingly valued as the alumni network has grown, of early adopters, users, people who can help and support, collaborators, true believers, promoters, warm intros, etc., which is super helpful and valuable. And then lastly, they have their demo day, which again gives access to capital for follow-on investment so that the founders don't have to waste so much time chasing down VCs. And I think it's been an amazing set of innovations. But I think it's a local maxima and we can do a lot better. And remember that YC only accepts 1% to 2% of the applicants. So what does that say? Or what does that mean? Or what could it mean? It could mean that there are vast numbers of highly qualified, highly motivated founders with great founder energy who, if combined with a community that could bring them early adopters, feedback, early users, collaboration, and combined with capital, that they could build many, many, many more successful startups. And I think that it's interesting that even with these innovations, which have been considerable and which have been obviously very successful, that even with them, some huge proportion of YC founders and startups die. And I think it's around 90%. I don't think it's very different from the average VC failure rate. And I think it's probably regressed to the mean as the cohorts have gotten bigger. I could be wrong. I would love to have more data. I don't have all the data, but if anyone has some, I'd love to hear it. But my operating thesis is that founder energy is the most valuable thing in the world. Startups save the world. And so if we can unlock more founder energy, like fracking, using different techniques, different technologies, and then if we can make it so that those startups can have early traction and early adoption, and if we can make those startups have access to early capital without wasting a lot of energy, that we might unlock many, many more successful startups. That's my thesis. Kumar, thank you for sharing the stories about Airbnb and Uber. I found this very interesting. Ultimately, we live in a thoroughly corrupt world because we live in a world of incredible centralized power that has come to eat a massive amount of the productivity of the nation state. And so, yes, they had to, both Airbnb and Uber had to kiss the ring to survive. But they did open optionality, they did provide competition, and they did bring technology to bear on a problem of stranger-to-stranger services. And they solved it in a way that was way better than a taxi. There's no denying it. And way better than an overpriced hotel or a hotel that's sold out or, sleeping on a street or not taking a trip. And so while I totally understand that it's not a perfect world where technology defeated the monopolists, and of course, now Uber's a monopolist, Airbnb has more competition. But I take your points, and I thank you for sharing them.
You and I think about the world in very different terms. I would say the framework of an action matters more than the intent itself. And what I mean by that is if you ever go to a courthouse where there's a drunk driver, they didn't intend to kill anybody. But that was the framework of their action. So I tend to think frameworks are more important. How many countless cab drivers committed suicide on behalf of Uber deciding to circumvent the laws and track cops in 50 states and every country in the world? Every country in the world.
I think you're being dramatic. I don't think I've ever heard of a single suicide attributed to Uber disrupting the livelihoods of taxi drivers. The taxi drivers didn't own the medallions. The taxi companies owned the medallions, and the taxi drivers had to rent out their cabs. That was the model. And they lived in those fucking things, and they smelled terrible. And it wasn't much fun. And now they have the flexibility to participate in a gig economy with their own car, subsidized by venture capital often, at least in the States. I don't know how it is in the rest of the world. But I don't understand your perspective, honestly. And I don't think it's correct, because I think you're referring to taxi drivers when the people that had the most negative impact were the taxi medallion owners.
So not sure if you've ever talked to the Indian community and the foreign diasporas of immigrants that were cab drivers, but there were many suicides. And if you don't know that, then you're missing out on the story. Ubers don't generate tax revenue per mile at the same rate that taxi medallions and cab owners do, and cabs do. I'm not saying that cabs were the model to be all end all, but you have to understand that Uber was financed by pension funds. Pension funds invest because they're not getting enough tax revenue to finance the pension and enough return on the pension fund. So it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The people that made money were the founders, the VCs, and the common man is the victim here. Oh, and sorry for coming off as dramatic. I tend to be a little bit intense at times, but it's nothing negative. It's because I like to wrestle with ideas. I like to look at companies on a 15 to 20 year basis, or I like to look at them on a sort of a comparative financial scale. If you look at Airbnb, given the amount of venture scale funding it's had, it feels like a dump on retail. Same for Airbnb, or same for Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, the full gambit of all these companies.
Hey, Kumar, thanks for sharing. No worries. I actually like people who are intense, especially if they combine it with being able to explain themselves clearly, cogently, and then be open to any kind of error correction. So intensity for me is an incredible virtue. And I wish there was more of it, honestly. I think people are so soft and so, what's the opposite of intense? Dispersed and diffuse. And I can't be around people like that.
The term to dump something on a retail investor feels kind of like a misnomer to me, because nothing is dumped. The shares are purchased with an intent by these investors. If you believe in Austrian economics, every purchase is made with some rationale, or every action is purposeful. Here especially, this feels like a wrong concept.
Moritz, that's a cute notion. Institutions control people's funds. A large percentage of the total volume of the stock market is institutional money.